Hello all, welcome to Education to Everyone. As a part of our next chapter, we are going to learn about the structure of human heart and its internal structure, thereby the different parts and components of the human heart. And if you look at here, on the left side you can find the external structure of human heart, which just shows the different chambers, the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, the left ventricle, and certain blood vessels that are passing through, and the major blood vessels only. And on the other side we can also visualize the presence of internal structure of human heart. Before going into the detailed explanation of the structure of human heart, let us say the human circulatory system is also called as the cardiovascular system, which comprises of the blood vessels along with the pumping organ called as the heart. So as the blood is important as a fluid medium which can transport different gases, nutrients as well as the excretory waste, inclusive of hormones and enzymes, we also at the same time need a particular pumping organ which helps in pumping of this oxygenated as well as deoxygenated blood into different organs. And such an organ or such a pumping organ is the human heart. Now let us see what are the different measurements of heart, what is its size, what is its location, where is it present, and what are the different protective layers or protective measures where this human heart is being protected from different physical shocks. So initially if we look at, the human heart is located in the mediastinal cavity. In the mediastinal cavity. What is this mediastinum or mediastinal cavity? The space that is present in between both the lungs is called as the mediastinal cavity. Though we say that heart is slightly tilted towards the left or it is present on the left side, it is actually present only at the center, but its left ventricular part is slightly towards the left, for which we get a feeling that the heart is situated on the left side of the thoracic cavity, but in practice it is not. So it is located in the mediastinal cavity of thorax, or we can say upper thorax. It is guarded by the rib cage. There are 12 pairs of ribs present, which we have discussed in our previous sessions. It is protected by rib cage, and when it comes to heart alone, it is surrounded by two membranes or two layers which are called as pericardia or pericardium. So the pericardium, which is towards the thoracic cavity, is usually called as the parietal pericardium, and towards the inner side, that means towards the heart wall, it is called as the visceral pericardium. So the pericardium is of two different types again, outer and inner. Outer one is called as the parietal pericardium and inner ones is called as the visceral pericardium. And when it comes to the muscular part of the heart, it is composed of a specialized muscular tissue called as the cardiac muscle, and this cardiac muscle is consisting of a slightly excitatory patch present on its upper right corner of right atrium, which we'll be discussing in our further sessions. And if we look at the external structure, this is what you can actually visualize: the location of the heart in the mediastinal cavity of upper thorax, and it is protected by the rib cage and also two layers, the parietal pericardium and the visceral pericardium. And when it comes to the size, this is approximately 12 centimeters in its length and nearly 2.5 to 3 centimeters in its width. In your earlier classes, you have studied that the size of the heart ranges anywhere between the size of one's fist. The size of your own fist will be the size of your heart. On an average, when we look into the weight of a human heart, it ranges between 250 to 280 grams in case of female, and 280 grams to 320 grams in case of male. As we have discussed in before classes also, all these visceral organs or internal organs in males, they will be comparatively more in their weight than that of female, because they are under the influence of a male hormone called as the testosterone. So because of the presence of this testosterone, in general male will contain larger size or bigger organs when compared with the female. And you can also compare both of these external structure as well as the internal structure of the human heart. Here you can find the largest blood vessel called as the aorta, and the largest artery which is carrying the deoxygenated blood is the pulmonary artery. You can see vena cava present over here, superior and inferior vena cava. Only this much can be visualized in the external structure of human heart. And when it comes to the internal structure, we can find different parts present over here. First, let us start with the chambers of the heart. There are 4 chambers present in the heart. One is called as the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. So what is the function of these 4 chambers? What is the necessity of having 4 chambers? As a part of evolution in human heart, initially if we look at, fish possessed only 2 chambers where intermixing of blood has taken place. Later on amphibians, there were only 3 chambers, again intermixing has taken place. Later on in reptiles, excepting crocodile, there were incompletely divided 4 chambers. Again there was intermixing of blood took place. But when it comes to mammals, in mammalian heart, you can find there is no intermixing of any blood when it is passing through these completely divided 4 chambers. How they are divided, let us now have a look at. Now the 2 atria are separated by a muscular wall which is called as the interatrial septum. Interatrial septum. That means in between both the atria there is a muscular wall which is called as interatrial septum. And similarly here you can observe in the internal structure, in between both the ventricles also there is an other septum which is called as the interventricular septum. Interventricular septum. And now the flow of blood, if we look at it, the right atrium plays a major role in receiving the deoxygenated blood from different major blood vessels like the vena cava. And vena cava can be further classified into 2 different major categories, the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, provided the deoxygenated blood also will be received from another source called as the coronary veins. So here, whenever we are using a term called as coronary veins, this coronary vein or coronary artery is associated with the heart itself. That means the veins which are carrying deoxygenated blood from the heart muscle itself are called as coronary veins. The veins or the arteries which are distributing the oxygenated blood to the heart itself, they are called as coronary arteries. So similarly, we have got different blood vessels associated with the heart. So first let us have a look at them. The right atrium, here you can observe this entire part is the right atrium over here, and this right atrium will receive the deoxygenated blood, one from superior vena cava and the other from inferior vena cava, and the other one as discussed from the coronary veins. And these veins will open through certain openings, opening of superior vena cava, opening of inferior vena cava, and opening of coronary veins like this. But excluding this superior vena cava, the inferior and coronary vena cava are further guarded by certain valves. This is one of the most important questions in matrix matching if we look at what are the different valves that are present in the heart. One being the Eustachian valve, the inferior vena cava, which is bringing the deoxygenated blood from the posterior parts of the body, is guarded by a valve called as the Eustachian valve. And superior vena cava, it doesn't have any valve, the opening doesn't have any valve. And the next one is the coronary veins. The coronary veins will be opening into another opening, the coronary opening, which will be guarded by another valve called as the Thebacean valve. The Thebacean valve. Apart from these three, certain other valves are also present. Like in between right atrium and right ventricle, we have tricuspid valve. And between left atrium and left ventricle, we have bicuspid valve. Bicuspid valve is also called as the mitral valve. And here you have to remember one point is that both of these, the tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve together, they are referred as the atrioventricular valves. Interatrioventricular valves. Apart from these, there are pair of semilunar valves. Semilunar valves. How many semilunar valves are there? Two types. One being the aortic semilunar valve and the other one is the pulmonary semilunar valve. Aortic semilunar valve is present at the base of aortic trunk. So this is the aortic arch. So it is present at the aortic trunk. So here you can find the aortic semilunar valve. And the pulmonary semilunar valve is present at the pulmonary trunk here, which is opening into pulmonary artery. So that way we have these different types of valves present which are guarding the movement of the blood. So this is about the valves, atria and ventricles. And if we look at the histology of the heart, outermost we already said pericardium is present, parietal pericardium and visceral pericardium, which is guarding the heart from physical shocks, and in between both of these a space is present and that space is filled with a fluid called as pericardial fluid. Pericardial space is present and that space is filled with pericardial fluid, and inner to it you can find a muscle present which is forming the middle layer of the heart called as the myocardium. The strongest muscle of the heart, the myocardium, you can find it in between both the ventricles. And the heart wall on the inner side is made up of the endothelium, or you can call it as the endocardium. And you can find certain ridges and grooves present on the wall of the ventricles, which are specialized muscles here. These specialized muscles are present on the ventricular valves, which are called as the papillary muscles. and these papillary muscles will help in holding these thin white color fiber like structures called as chordae tendineae. Chordae tendineae. What are these chordae tendineae? What is their importance here? These chordae tendineae, white fibrous cords, they will hold these valves, the bicuspid and tricuspid valves, very much tight during powerful ventricular contraction. So whenever ventricles are contracting very powerfully, there is every possibility that the valves may move backward again, and it leads to leakage of the blood from ventricles back into the atria. So to prevent that, we have certain white fibrous cords which are called as chordae tendineae. On the other side, they are held tight by papillary muscles. Right, that is about the ventricles. And when it comes to the atria, in the atria, in your earlier classes you might have studied that atria are also called as auricles, but actually no. The reason is inside atria there is a small ear shaped structure, dog ear shaped structure called as auricle. Of course, it has no physiological importance in heart, in the functioning of heart rather. And here if you observe, there is a small ligamentum arteriosum present between pulmonary artery and the aorta. This ligamentum arteriosum in the fetal stage or in the embryonic stage, it is called as ductus arteriosus. Ductus arteriosus, which is an embryonic remnant. It is present only in the embryo, so we can consider it as an embryonic remnant. And in between both of these atria, there is a small pore-like structure. In adults, it appears only as a depression, which is called as fossa ovalis. Fossa ovalis. In embryonic stages, that is used, or in the fetal stages, that is used for bypassing of the blood between right atrium and the left atrium. But in adults, it only remains as a small depression, and it is called as the fossa ovalis. And now when it comes to the movement of the blood, the pulmonary veins from the lungs will bring the already oxygenated blood into the left atrium. So, how many pairs of pulmonary veins are there? 2 pairs. So, these 2 pulmonary veins will bring from the left or right lung and opens through 4 openings. And the oxygenated blood will be dumped into the left atrium, and from left atrium, due to high contraction, the oxygenated blood will move from left atrium into the left ventricle, and once from left ventricle, when the aortic semilunar valve will open, the blood moves into the aorta, and from aorta 3 major branches will arise, one being the left common carotid artery, and the other one is the left subclavian artery, and the other one is the brachiocephalic artery. So this way 3 major branches will arise from the aorta. Right. And when it comes to the movement of the blood, of deoxygenated blood, the blood is received into the vena cava, the major veins, the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, which will dump the blood into the right atrium, and again due to the powerful contractions of the right atrium, the blood will move from right atrium into the right ventricle by the activity of the valves on both the sides. So when tricuspid valve will open, from right atrium, blood will move into the right ventricle. when bicuspid valve will open, the oxygenated blood will move from left atrium into the left ventricle. So this activity is completely guarded by both valves on both sides in between the atria and the ventricles. After movement of blood from atria into ventricles, then the blood moves, and now once the blood is received at both the ends of the ventricles, the right ventricle and the left ventricle, again the pressure increases in the respective ventricles, thereby the blood moves from ventricle into the pulmonary artery on the right side, from the right side, and from left ventricle into the aorta from the left ventricle. So this is the way how the blood is moving here. But one point, the pulmonary artery is branched into right pulmonary artery and left pulmonary artery, so that whatever the deoxygenated blood that is being received from the superior vena cava and coronary veins and inferior vena cava, it is being distributed to both the lungs on right side as well as on the left side. But when it comes to aorta, it also has to distribute the already oxygenated blood, so it is being divided into three major branches called as the subclavian artery, the left common carotid artery, and the brachiocephalic artery, which will distribute the blood or oxygenated blood to the head and neck regions. And in the next coming sessions, we will be looking into the functioning of the heart, the movement of the blood, and pacemaker. Thank you all.